"Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." The words cut through the evening air with practiced authority, but Judge Diana Reeves didn't move. Her hands remained precisely at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel of her modest Honda Civic, the same position she'd maintained for the past 12 minutes, while Officer Bradley Hutchins circled her car like a predator sizing up prey. "I asked you a question earlier," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "What specific traffic violation am I being cited for?" Through her rearview mirror, she watched Hutchins' jaw tighten. His hand had been resting on his service weapon for the past 3 minutes, a detail that wasn't lost on Diana, who had spent 15 years observing every microexpression and body language tell in her courtroom. "Don't make this difficult," Hutchins replied, his tone shifting to that particular brand of condescension Diana recognized all too well. "I clocked you going 42 in a 35 zone." Diana's eyes flicked to her dashboard. Her cruise control was still set to 34. It had been since she'd turned onto Maple Ridge Drive 20 minutes ago, heading home from her evening run through the park. The same route she'd taken every Tuesday for the past 3 years. "Officer, I'd like to see the radar reading." "Ma'am, I need you to step out of the vehicle." Now, the command carried weight, but Diana had spent her career dealing with men who confused authority with intimidation. She'd seen this exact scenario play out in her courtroom dozens of times, always from the other side, always reviewing body camera footage, always rendering judgment after the fact. Never from this seat. Never with her heart hammering against her ribs. A car slowed as it passed, the driver's curious gaze taking in the scene. Then another. Diana caught a glimpse of someone across the street stopping their evening walk, cell phone already in hand. "Officer Hutchins," she said, reading his nameplate in her side mirror. "I'm going to reach for my registration and insurance, which are in my glove compartment. Keep your hands where I can see them. There where you can see them." Diana's voice carried a note of steel now. "I'm informing you of my movements as a courtesy and for both our safety." She'd trained herself never to let emotion creep into her voice during tense moments, but 20 years of legal experience hadn't prepared her for this particular kind of vulnerability. In her courtroom, she wore robes that commanded respect. Here, in this car, wearing running clothes and no makeup after her workout, she was just another black woman being questioned for existing in a neighborhood where someone had decided she didn't belong. Hutchins moved closer to her window. "What's your business in this area?" "I live here." The words came out clipped, professional. Diana had learned long ago that anger, no matter how justified, would only escalate situations like this. "Where exactly?" "Officer, am I under arrest?" "Answer the question." Diana's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. Through her peripheral vision, she noticed more cars slowing down. A woman walking her dog had stopped completely and was now openly recording with her phone from about 30 feet away. 1743 Maple Ridge Drive, Diana said. "The blue house with the oak tree in the front yard that the city has been threatening to cut down for the past 6 months." It was a specific detail, the kind that could be easily verified. But Hutchins didn't seem interested in verification. "You visiting someone there?" "I live there." "Alone?" Diana felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Officer, what does that have to do with a traffic violation?" "I'm trying to establish your credibility." The word hung in the air between them like a challenge. Credibility. As if her word about her own address wasn't sufficient. As if her calm cooperation wasn't enough. As if everything about this stop wasn't already outside the bounds of a routine traffic enforcement. Diana had presided over hundreds of cases involving traffic stops that had escalated beyond reason. She'd seen the footage, heard the testimonies, watched officers explain their actions to juries. But experiencing the systematic erosion of dignity firsthand was entirely different from analyzing it from the bench. A second patrol car pulled up behind Hutchins' vehicle. "Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from." Diana's pulse quickened as she watched Officer Ressler emerge from the backup vehicle. 2 against 1 now. The mathematics of power shifting with each passing moment. "Everything all right, Hutch?" Ressler called out, approaching with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this dance before. "Just working through some inconsistencies," Hutchins replied, never taking his eyes off Diana. Ressler leaned down to peer through the passenger window. Diana turned slightly to meet his gaze, her expression neutral but alert. She'd learned to read rooms quickly. It was essential in her profession, and what she read in Ressler's face wasn't hostility. It was something closer to uncertainty. "Ma'am," Ressler said, his tone notably different from his partner's. "Can we see your license and registration?" Finally, a reasonable request delivered with basic courtesy. "Of course," Diana replied. "As I mentioned to Officer Hutchins, my registration is in the glove compartment. My license is in my wallet in my purse, which is on the passenger seat." She moved slowly, deliberately, narrating each action. The glove compartment opened with a soft click. Her insurance card and registration were exactly where they should be, held together with a small clip behind her owner's manual. But as her fingers closed around her wallet, Diana felt a moment of dark irony. In a few seconds, everything would change. The small leather badge case next to her driver's license would shift this entire encounter from harassment to humiliation, but not hers. She handed her license through the window. Hutchins took it, glanced at it briefly, then looked back at her with the same skeptical expression he'd worn for the past 15 minutes. Then his eyes went back to the license. Diana watched his face with the clinical attention she usually reserved for witnesses on the verge of breaking. She saw the exact moment recognition hit. The slight widening of his eyes, the almost imperceptible step backward, the way his mouth opened just slightly before he caught himself. "Judge Diana Reeves," he read aloud, his voice suddenly hollow. Ressler straightened as if he'd been struck. "Judge Reeves." Diana said nothing. She simply sat in her car, hands still visible on the steering wheel, watching two officers realize they'd just spent the last 15 minutes racially profiling a sitting judge whose courtroom had seen more police misconduct cases than any other in the county. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of body cameras still recording, bystanders still watching, and the sudden understanding that this stop would be dissected by internal affairs, defense attorneys, and quite possibly the media before the week was over. But what Hutchins and Ressler didn't know, what they couldn't know as they stood there calculating the damage to their careers, was that Judge Diana Reeves had been waiting her entire professional life for exactly this moment. Not hoping for it, not seeking it out, but waiting for the day when she'd experience firsthand the very system she'd been trying to reform from the bench, one case at a time, one ruling at a time, one officer at a time. The day when she'd finally have the perfect case study in institutional prejudice. The day when she'd become both judge and witness in the same courtroom. Hutchins' hand was trembling slightly as he held her license, and Diana realized with crystalline clarity that this traffic stop was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Diana maintained her composure as she watched Officer Hutchins fumble with her license, but her mind was racing through 15 years of legal precedent. Every excessive force case she'd ruled on. Every civil rights violation she'd seen dismissed on technicalities. Every time she'd watched officers testify under oath about their reasonable suspicions, while body camera footage told a different story. She'd become a judge because of moments exactly like this one. The memory surfaced unbidden. Her father's hands pressed against the hood of his Buick 32 years ago, her 10-year-old self watching from the back seat as two officers searched their car after a routine traffic stop that lasted 47 minutes. They'd been driving home from her piano recital, her father still wearing his best suit, her mother clutching the program with Diana's name highlighted in yellow marker. They'd found nothing because there was nothing to find. But the humiliation in her father's eyes when he finally got back in the car had burned itself into Diana's memory like a brand. "Your Honor," Ressler said, his voice carefully modulated now. "I apologize for any." "Don't." Diana's voice cut through his attempted deference. "Don't apologize to me because of my title. Apologize for the stop. Or don't apologize at all." Hutchins was staring at her license like it might spontaneously combust. Diana could practically see the gears turning in his head, calculating how to salvage a situation that had already spiraled beyond repair. "Judge, we had reasonable suspicion," Hutchins began. "Based on what?" Diana's question was sharp, precise. The same tone she used when cross-examining hostile witnesses. "Officer Hutchins, you stated I was speeding. My vehicle has GPS tracking through my insurance company that records my speed every 30 seconds. Would you like to make this a matter of official record?" The color drained from Hutchins' face. Ressler shot him a look that could have melted steel. But what neither officer knew was that Diana's insurance didn't actually track her speed. It was a calculated bluff, the kind she'd learned to deploy during her years as a prosecutor before ascending to the bench. The kind that separated truth from fabrication with surgical precision. Hutchins fell for it completely. "Look, Your Honor, maybe we can." Maybe you can what? Diana stepped out of her car slowly, deliberately. She was 5'6" in her running shoes, but authority had nothing to do with height. Maybe you can pretend the last 15 minutes didn't happen? Maybe you can edit the body camera footage? Maybe you can convince the 7 bystanders who recorded this interaction to delete their videos. She gestured toward the growing crowd. What had started as casual curiosity was now full attention. Mrs. Chun from 2 houses down was openly filming with her tablet. The college student who jogged past her house every evening was standing perfectly still, his phone capturing everything. A news van was pulling up at the corner. How did they? Ressler started. Social media moves fast, Officer Ressler. Diana's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. Especially when it involves a traffic stop that's lasted 23 minutes without a citation being issued. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Then again. The notifications were coming fast now. Texts, calls, Twitter mentions. Word was spreading through legal circles at light speed. Judge Diana Reeves, the woman who'd held more officers accountable for misconduct than any sitting judge in the state, had just been profiled during a traffic stop. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. But what was about to unfold would surprise everyone, including Diana herself. A black SUV pulled up behind the second patrol car. Chief Williams emerged, his expression grim. Diana had seen him testify in her courtroom twice. Once in a use of force case that had ended with a settlement, once in a wrongful arrest case that had cost the city $40,000. He'd been professional both times. Respectful, even. Diana had appreciated that in a profession where too many officials treated accountability as an enemy rather than an ally. Judge Reeves, Williams said, approaching with his hands visible and empty. I got the call. I'm here to personally ensure this situation is handled properly. Diana studied his face. There was something in his expression, a weight that went beyond this single incident. Chief Williams, if I may ask, what was the stated reason for this stop? Before Diana could respond, Hutchins jumped in. Chief, the judge was speeding. I clocked her at 42 in a 35. Williams' eyes flicked to the dashboard camera on Hutchins' patrol car. Then to Ressler. Then back to Diana. Judge, were you speeding? Diana appreciated the directness. No. I was using cruise control set at 34 miles per hour. Chief, Hutchins said, his voice rising slightly. She's obviously going to. Officer Hutchins. Williams' tone was ice. You're going to return to your vehicle and wait for further instruction. As Hutchins reluctantly withdrew, Williams moved closer to Diana. His voice dropped to just above a whisper. Judge, I need you to know something. This stop was called in. Diana felt her blood chill. Called in by whom? Anonymous tip. Reported a suspicious vehicle driven by a black female acting nervously in this neighborhood. Gave your license plate number. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Someone had deliberately set this in motion. Someone who knew her routine, knew her route, knew exactly where she'd be and when. Chief, do you have the recording of that call? Williams nodded grimly. That's why I came personally. Judge, the voice on that call. It's someone with a vendetta. Someone who knows your schedule well enough to predict your movements. Diana's mind raced through possibilities. Defense attorneys whose cases she'd ruled against. Officers she'd held in contempt. Defendants she'd sentenced. The list was long and varied, but narrowing it down to someone with access to her personal routine significantly shortened the pool. There's more, Williams said. The call came from inside the courthouse. The betrayal hit Diana like a physical blow. Someone in her own building, someone she worked alongside, someone she trusted, someone with access to her chambers and her calendar, had orchestrated this entire encounter. Her phone rang. The caller ID read Rebecca Hart, her longtime friend and fellow judge who occupied the chambers right next to hers. Diana, thank God. Rebecca's voice was breathless with concern. I just heard. Are you okay? I'm watching the live stream right now. You're watching what live stream? It's all over social media. Someone's broadcasting this whole thing live on Facebook. Diana, there are already 3,000 people watching. Diana looked around at the crowd with new eyes. Not just casual observers documenting an incident. Someone was actively streaming this confrontation to the world, turning her humiliation into entertainment. Rebecca, I need you to do something for me. Check who had access to my schedule today. Check who knew I'd be running in the park this evening. Diana, what are you thinking? I'm thinking this wasn't random. Through her phone, Diana heard the distinctive sound of fingers flying across a keyboard. Rebecca had always been a multitasker. Oh no, Rebecca whispered. Diana, you're not going to like this. What is it? Your calendar for today. It was accessed by someone other than you and your clerk. The system shows a login at 2:47 p.m. from. Rebecca paused. From Judge Harold's chambers. Judge Harrison Harold. Diana's former mentor. The man who'd recommended her for her first judicial appointment. The man who'd guided her through her early years on the bench with patience and wisdom. The man who'd been increasingly cold toward her ever since she'd started aggressively prosecuting police misconduct cases. The man who'd quietly expressed his opinion that she was too activist for the judiciary. The man who 3 months ago had told her privately that she was making enemies of the wrong people and should consider tempering her approach. Rebecca, Diana said, her voice hollow. I need to know exactly what time Judge Harold left the courthouse today. Already checking. Diana, he signed out at 4:15 p.m. 20 minutes before you would have started your run. Plenty of time to make an anonymous call. Plenty of time to set up this entire scenario. Chief Williams was watching her face intently. Judge, what is it? Diana looked around at the scene surrounding her. Officers with their careers on the line, bystanders recording every moment, news crews arriving, social media broadcasting her humiliation to thousands of strangers. All of it orchestrated by someone she'd trusted. Someone who decided to teach her a lesson about knowing her place. Chief Williams, she said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. I need to see that anonymous tip recording. And I need to see it now. Because if her suspicions were correct, this traffic stop wasn't just about racial profiling. It was about silencing a judge who'd refused to be silenced. And it was about to become a war. Chief Williams pulled out his phone and scrolled through several screens before finding what he was looking for. Judge, I'm going to play this call for you. But I need you to understand. Once you hear this, there's no going back. This becomes an active investigation. Diana nodded, but her attention was momentarily distracted by a commotion near the growing crowd of onlookers. A woman in a sharp charcoal suit was making her way through the bystanders with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. Even from 50 feet away, Diana could see she was someone who mattered. Before you play that, Diana said, who is that woman heading this way? Williams followed her gaze, and his expression shifted to something between respect and wariness. That's Alexandria Cross, civil rights attorney. She's been following police misconduct cases in this county for the past 2 years. Diana knew the name. Alexandria Cross had a reputation for taking on cases other lawyers wouldn't touch and winning settlements that made headlines. She was also known for her aggressive media strategy, something that could either help or completely destroy Diana's judicial career. Judge Reeves, Alexandria called out as she approached, her voice carrying the kind of authority that could silence a courtroom. I'm Alexandria Cross. I've been monitoring the live stream of this incident. Ms. Cross, Diana replied carefully. She was acutely aware that every word she spoke was being recorded by multiple devices. I wasn't aware this had become such a public spectacle. Judge, with respect, this stopped being a private matter the moment it was orchestrated. Alexandria's eyes were sharp, intelligent, and completely focused. And yes, I said orchestrated. I've been tracking a pattern of targeted harassment against reform-minded judges across 3 counties. What happened to you tonight fits the profile perfectly. Chief Williams stepped forward. Ms. Cross, this is an active police matter. Chief Williams, Alexandria interrupted smoothly. With all due respect, this stopped being just a police matter when it became a deliberate attempt to intimidate a sitting judge. This is now a federal civil rights investigation waiting to happen. Diana felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. What had started as a humiliating traffic stop was rapidly escalating into something that would define the rest of her career. Every choice she made in the next few minutes would have consequences she couldn't yet foresee. Play the recording, Diana said to Williams. I need to know what we're dealing with. Williams hesitated, glancing at Alexandria. Judge, once this recording is public, and with this many witnesses and cameras, it will be public. There's no controlling the narrative. I'm not interested in controlling the narrative, Diana replied. I'm interested in the truth. Williams pressed play on his phone and held it up so all 3 of them could hear clearly. The voice that emerged from the speaker was male, older, and speaking in a deliberately disguised whisper that nonetheless carried familiar inflections. I need to report suspicious activity in the Maple Ridge neighborhood. There's a black female driving erratically, appears to be casing houses. License plate number 779 X-ray Delta Charlie. Vehicle is a gray Honda Civic. She's been circling the block for 20 minutes, driving slowly, looking at houses like she's planning something. Diana's hands clenched into fists. Every word was a calculated lie. She'd driven straight home from the park, no circling, no erratic driving, no suspicious behavior of any kind. But what made her blood run cold was the voice itself. "Play it again," she said. Williams obliged. This time, Diana listened not to the words but to the speech patterns, the slight accent, the particular way certain consonants were pronounced. "Chief," she said slowly, "I need you to check something for me. What time was that call received?" Williams scrolled through his phone. 6:47 p.m. Diana pulled out her own phone and scrolled through her calendar app. "Rebecca," she called out to her phone, putting it on speaker. "Are you still there?" "I'm here." "Diana, what's happening?" The live stream viewer count just hit 12,000. "Rebecca, I need you to check Judge Harold's calendar again. What was his last appointment today?" "Checking. He had a settlement conference that ended at 4:30. Then," Rebecca paused. "Then he had a blocked-out time from 5:30 to 7 p.m. marked as personal research." Alexandria was watching Diana intently. "Judge, you recognize the voice." It wasn't a question. "I think I do," Diana said. "But I need to be certain before I make any accusations." Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID read Judge Harold. Diana stared at the screen for a long moment. Around her, the chaos of the traffic stop continued. Officers conferring in hushed tones, bystanders recording everything, news crews setting up equipment. But in this moment, everything felt suspended. "Answer it," Alexandria said quietly. "Put it on speaker." Diana hesitated. Answering that call would cross a line. It would transform this from an incident she'd experienced into a confrontation she was actively pursuing. But the alternative, pretending this was random, letting it slide, accepting the humiliation as the cost of her activism, felt like a betrayal of everything she'd worked for. She answered the call. "Diana, my dear," Harold's voice was smooth, concerned, grandfatherly. "I just heard about your unfortunate encounter this evening. Are you all right?" Alexandria was recording the call on her own phone. Chief Williams was taking notes. The crowd was pressing closer, sensing that something significant was happening. "I'm fine, Harry," Diana said, using his first name deliberately. "How did you hear about it so quickly?" "Oh, you know how fast news travels in legal circles. Especially when it involves one of our own." His tone was perfect, exactly the right amount of concern mixed with casual affection. Diana looked at Alexandria, who nodded encouragingly. "Harry, can you do me a favor? I need you to say 779 X-ray Delta Charlie for me." Silence on the other end of the line. "I'm sorry, what was that, Diana?" "My license plate number. I need you to read it back to me. 779 X-ray Delta Charlie." Another pause. When Harold spoke again, his voice had changed subtly. The grandfatherly warmth was gone, replaced by something cooler, more careful. "Diana, I'm not sure what you're suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything, Harry. I'm asking you to repeat my license plate number." The silence stretched for nearly 10 seconds. When Harold finally spoke, his voice carried a note of steel that Diana had never heard before. 779 X-ray Delta Charlie. The pronunciation was identical to the anonymous tip. The slight emphasis on Delta. The way he clipped the Charlie. Even the rhythm was the same. Alexandria was nodding slowly. Chief Williams had stopped writing and was staring at Diana's phone. "Thank you, Harry," Diana said. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." "Diana, I think we should talk privately." "No, Harry. I think we're done talking privately. In fact, I think we're done talking at all." She ended the call. The weight of what had just happened settled over her like a lead blanket. She'd just confronted her former mentor, a sitting judge with 30 years on the bench, with evidence that he'd orchestrated her harassment. She'd done it in front of a civil rights attorney, a police chief, and an audience of thousands watching online. There was no taking it back now. "Judge Reeves," Alexandria said softly, "you just burned every bridge you have in the judicial establishment." Diana looked around at the scene. The officers who'd humiliated her, the bystanders who'd witnessed her degradation, the news crews that would broadcast her story across the state. "Good," she said. "Those bridges were built on a foundation of silence and complicity. Maybe it's time to build better ones." Alexandria smiled, the first genuine smile Diana had seen all evening. "Judge, I think you and I need to have a very long conversation about turning this incident into something that changes everything." But before Diana could respond, Officer Hutchins approached with a piece of paper in his hand. "Your Honor," he said, his voice thick with humiliation, "I'm issuing you a citation." Diana stared at him in disbelief. For what? Failure to signal when changing lanes. The audacity of it hit her like a slap. After everything that had just transpired, the exposed conspiracy, the anonymous tip, the proof of her mentor's betrayal, Hutchins was still trying to salvage his version of events. Diana looked at the citation, then at the growing crowd, then at the news cameras that were now broadcasting live. She had a choice to make. She could accept the citation gracefully, take the high road, let the system handle this quietly through proper channels. Or she could use this moment to expose not just this incident, but the entire culture that had made it possible. "Officer Hutchins," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the crowd, "I accept this citation under protest. And I'll see you in my courtroom Monday morning at 9 a.m. Your Honor, I don't think you can preside over your own." "Not as the defendant," Diana interrupted. "As the judge hearing the motion I'm filing tomorrow morning to investigate every traffic stop you've conducted in the past year." The color drained from Hutchins' face. "Judge," Chief Williams said carefully, "that's a very serious allegation." "Chief Williams," Diana replied, "this is a very serious situation. And it's about to become a very serious federal case." Alexandria was grinning now. "Judge Reeves, I like your style. How would you feel about holding a press conference tomorrow morning?" Diana looked at her. This woman who'd appeared out of nowhere and was offering to help her turn the worst night of her professional life into a weapon for justice. "Ms. Cross," Diana said, "I think that's exactly what we're going to do." Because there was no going back now. The line had been crossed, the challenge had been issued, and the war had begun. And Diana intended to win it. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes bad news feel surreal. Diana stood in her kitchen at 5:47 a.m., watching the sunrise paint her backyard in shades of gold while her phone buzzed incessantly on the granite countertop. 43 missed calls. 67 text messages. Her email inbox showed 847 unread messages. She'd slept 3 hours. The coffee maker gurgled to life just as her doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, she could make out 2 figures on her front porch. Diana grabbed her robe and moved carefully toward the door, her hand instinctively reaching for the baseball bat she kept in the hall closet. "Judge Reeves." The voice was female, professional. "Agent Sarah Ressler, FBI. I have Agent Johnson with me. We'd like to speak with you about yesterday's incident." Diana peered through the peephole. 2 agents in dark suits, credentials visible, standing at a respectful distance from her door. The woman was tall, probably mid-40s, with the kind of bearing that suggested military background. The man was younger, nervous-looking, holding a tablet. She opened the door but kept the chain engaged. "Agents, it's quite early for a federal visit. Ma'am, we've been monitoring social media traffic related to your incident last night. There have been some developments we think you should know about." Diana's stomach dropped. "What kind of developments?" Agent Ressler glanced at her partner, then back at Diana. "Judge, have you checked your social media accounts this morning?" "I don't use social media." "Ma'am, you might want to start." Diana disengaged the chain and opened the door fully. The agent stepped inside, and Agent Johnson immediately handed her his tablet. The screen showed a Twitter account she'd never seen before at Judge Diana Reeves. The profile picture was a photo of her from last night's traffic stop, looking disheveled and angry. The bio read, "Activist judge who thinks she's above the law. Caught speeding, tried to use her position to avoid consequences." The account had been created at 11:47 p.m. the previous night. It had already posted 17 tweets, all designed to make her look like an entitled elitist who'd played the race card to avoid a legitimate traffic citation. "This isn't me," Diana said, scrolling through the posts with growing horror. "I've never had a Twitter account." "We know," Agent Ressler said. "The account was created using a VPN that traces back to a law library computer. Someone with sophisticated knowledge of how to cover digital tracks set this up specifically to damage your credibility." Diana sank into her kitchen chair, still clutching the tablet. The tweets were expertly crafted to undermine everything she'd fought for. They painted her as the exact kind of corrupt official she'd spent her career opposing. "There's more," Agent Johnson said gently. "Someone leaked your home address to several alt-right forums overnight. You've received approximately 200 threatening messages across various platforms." Her phone rang. "Alexandria Cross." "Judge, are you safe?" Alexandria's voice was tight with concern. I think so. The FBI is here. Good. Don't leave your house until I get there. And don't read anything online. I'm handling the media response. Alexandria, there's a fake Twitter account. I know. I'm already working on getting it taken down. But Judge. Alexandria paused. We have bigger problems. Diana closed her eyes. What now? Judge Harold filed an ethics complaint against you this morning. He's claiming you used your judicial position to intimidate police officers and that your behavior last night constitutes gross judicial misconduct. The words hit Diana like physical blows. An ethics complaint could end her career, strip her of her judgeship, destroy everything she'd worked for. Harold wasn't just fighting back, he was going nuclear. There's more, Alexandria continued. Someone leaked your sealed personnel file to the press. Details about your confirmation hearings, your law school grades, your divorce proceedings. Everything. Diana felt the walls of her kitchen closing in. Her divorce from Marcus had been finalized 3 years ago, but it had been messy, complicated by his resentment of her career ambitions and his drinking problem. Those sealed records contained details she'd never wanted made public. How is that even possible? Diana asked. Someone with high-level access to judicial records. Someone who knows exactly how to weaponize your personal history. Agent Ressler was watching Diana closely. Judge, we have reason to believe this is part of a coordinated campaign. You're not the first reform-minded judge to experience this kind of systematic harassment. What do you mean? Agent Johnson pulled up another screen on his tablet. 3 other judges in different counties have experienced similar incidents in the past 6 months. Anonymous tips leading to humiliating encounters with police, followed by social media attacks, leaked personnel files, ethics complaints. The pattern is too consistent to be coincidental. Diana stared at the faces on the screen. Judge Patricia Williams from the Northern District. Judge Michael Chin from the Eastern County. Judge Rebecca Ressler from the Coastal Region. All 3 had been vocal advocates for police reform. All 3 had ruled aggressively in civil rights cases. What happened to them? Judge Williams resigned after photos from her college years were leaked and taken out of context, Agent Ressler said. Judge Chin stepped down when his family received credible death threats. Judge Ressler is currently under investigation for alleged financial improprieties that we suspect were fabricated. The scope of it was staggering. This wasn't just about her. It was about systematically removing reform-minded judges from the bench. Judge, Agent Johnson said carefully, we believe you're dealing with an organized network. People with access to judicial records, law enforcement databases, and significant financial resources. Diana's doorbell rang again. Through the window, she could see a news van pulling up to the curb. Don't answer that, Agent Ressler said immediately. The media circus is just beginning. Diana's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You should have minded your own business. This is just the beginning. Then another, nice house. Would hate to see something happen to it. Agent Ressler was already on her radio, calling for a protective detail. Judge, Agent Johnson said, we're going to recommend you accept protective custody until we can assess the full scope of this threat. No, Diana's voice was firm. I'm not hiding from bullies. Judge, this isn't about courage. This is about survival. These people have resources, connections, and a proven track record of destroying careers and lives. Diana looked around her kitchen, the home she'd worked 20 years to afford, the space where she'd rebuilt her life after her divorce, the sanctuary where she'd prepared countless legal opinions that had made a difference in people's lives. Running felt like surrender, but staying felt like suicide. Her phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed her clerk, Maria Santos. Your Honor, Maria's voice was shaky. I'm so sorry to call this early, but there's been an incident at the courthouse. What kind of incident? Someone broke into your chambers last night. They didn't take anything, but they left something behind. Diana felt ice forming in her veins. What did they leave? A noose, hanging from your desk lamp. And a note. Agent Ressler was already signaling to her partner. They were preparing to leave immediately. What did the note say? Diana asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Uppity judges sometimes have accidents. Your Honor, I'm scared. Diana closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. In the span of 18 hours, she'd gone from respected jurist to hunted prey. Her career was under assault, her safety was compromised, and her personal life was being systematically destroyed. But beneath the fear and anger, something else was building. something harder and more dangerous than anything Harold and his allies had anticipated. Determination. "Maria," Diana said, "I'll be there in 2 hours. Cancel my morning calendar, but keep my afternoon appointments. And call building security. I want to know exactly who had access to my chambers after hours." "Your Honor, are you sure that's safe?" Diana looked at the FBI agents, who were shaking their heads vigorously. She looked at the news van outside her window. She thought about the other judges who'd been driven from the bench by this same campaign of intimidation. "Safety isn't the point anymore, Maria. Justice is." She ended the call and turned to Agent Ressler. "I need a favor. I need you to arrange a meeting between me and the other judges who've been targeted. Today." "Judge, that's not advisable." Agent Ressler, with respect, advisable went out the window the moment they decided to declare war on the judicial system itself. "Now we either fight back together, or they pick us off one by one." Her doorbell rang again. This time it was Alexandria Cross, looking fierce and determined even at 7 in the morning. "Judge," Alexandria said as she entered, "I've been thinking about this all night. We're not just fighting for you anymore. We're fighting for the principle that judges can't be intimidated into silence." She pulled out her laptop and opened it on Diana's kitchen table. "I've been in contact with civil rights organizations across the state. The ACLU wants to file a federal lawsuit. The NAACP is calling for a Department of Justice investigation. And the American Bar Association is preparing a statement condemning judicial intimidation." Diana felt a flicker of hope for the first time since yesterday evening. "But," Alexandria continued, "there's something else you need to know. I've been digging into Judge Harold's background. His financial records, his associations, his recent cases." She turned the laptop screen toward Diana. "Judge, Harold isn't just a racist mentor with a grudge. He's financially connected to several organizations that have been fighting police reform legislation across the state. He's been receiving speaking fees, consulting payments, and what look like disguised donations from groups with clear interests in maintaining the status quo." The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place. This wasn't personal revenge, it was business. Harold and his allies had a financial stake in maintaining a system that protected bad cops and silenced reform. "There's more," Alexandria said. "I found evidence that Harold has been coordinating with judges in other districts. Email chains discussing problematic activist judges and strategies for neutralizing their influence." Diana stared at the screen, reading emails that laid bare a conspiracy to undermine judicial independence itself. "Alexandria," she said slowly, "how did you get access to Harold's private emails?" Alexandria hesitated for the first time since Diana had met her. "I have a source inside the courthouse. Someone who's been watching this conspiracy develop for months." "Who?" "Someone who's taking a significant risk by helping us. Someone who could lose everything if their identity is revealed." Agent Ressler stepped forward. "Ms. Cross, if you have evidence of criminal activity." "I have evidence of something much bigger than criminal activity," Alexandria interrupted. "I have evidence of a systematic assault on the independence of the judiciary. And I have a plan to stop it." Diana looked at this woman who'd appeared in her life less than 24 hours ago and was now asking her to trust everything to a plan Diana hadn't even heard yet. "What kind of plan?" Alexandria smiled, the same fierce expression Diana had seen last night. "The kind that turns hunters into the hunted." "Judge, how would you feel about going on the offensive?" Outside, Diana could hear more news vans arriving. Her phone was buzzing with more threats and more offers of help. The FBI agents were clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation was taking. But Diana found herself drawn to Alexandria's confidence, her intelligence, her absolute refusal to be intimidated. "Tell me the plan," Diana said. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like she might actually survive it. Diana stared at Alexandria's laptop screen, absorbing the scope of Harold's conspiracy, when her phone rang with a call from Rebecca Hart. "Diana, thank God you're answering." Rebecca's voice was breathless with panic. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. Something terrible has happened." "What now?" Diana asked, putting the call on speaker so the FBI agents could hear. "It's about that source Alexandria mentioned. The one inside the courthouse." Rebecca's voice cracked. "Diana, I think I know who it is. And I think you're in immediate danger." Alexandria looked up sharply from her laptop. Agent Ressler stepped closer to the phone. "What do you mean?" Diana asked. "I've been going through the access logs like you asked, and I found something. Someone has been accessing not just your calendar, but all the targeted judges' schedules. Someone with administrative privileges. Diana felt her heart rate accelerate. Who? Diana, the access pattern. It matches perfectly with someone who had legitimate reasons to know all of your movements. Someone you trust completely. The kitchen fell silent except for the distant hum of news helicopters circling overhead. Rebecca, just tell me who it is. It's your clerk, Maria. Diana, Maria has been feeding your schedule to Harold for months. But that's not the worst part. Rebecca's voice dropped to a whisper. I just found out. Maria isn't just Harold's informant. She's his daughter. The words hit Diana like a physical blow. Maria Santos. The young woman she'd mentored for 2 years. The clerk she'd trusted with her most sensitive cases, her calendar, her private opinions. The person who had access to everything. That's impossible, Diana said. Maria's maiden name was Rodriguez. She got married last year. Diana, I checked her employment records. Her full name is Maria Santos Rodriguez Harold. She used her married name and mother's maiden name on her application. She never disclosed the family connection. Agent Johnson was already pulling up files on his tablet. Judge, if that's true, it means everything about your security has been compromised from the beginning. But Alexandria was staring at Rebecca's name on the phone screen with a strange expression. Judge Hart, she said carefully, how exactly did you access those employment records so quickly? I'm sorry, who is this? Rebecca asked. Alexandria Cross, civil rights attorney. I'm working with Judge Reeves. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Rebecca, Diana prompted. Diana, we need to talk privately. Can you send the others away for a moment? Something in Rebecca's tone made Diana's skin crawl. Rebecca, whatever you need to say, you can say in front of everyone here. Diana, please. This is complicated. Alexandria was now staring intently at the phone, her expression shifting to something between suspicion and recognition. Judge Hart, Alexandria said. Before you continue, can you tell me how you knew to call Judge Reeves at exactly this moment? How did you know we were discussing courthouse access logs? Another silence. I was monitoring the situation. Monitoring how? Alexandria pressed. Judge Hart, are you recording this call? Diana felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Rebecca, answer the question. Diana, I can explain. Are you recording this call? Diana's voice was steel. Yes, Rebecca whispered. But not for the reasons you think. Agent Ressler was already signaling for backup on her radio. Agent Johnson was reviewing something on his tablet with growing alarm. Judge, Agent Johnson said quietly, we have a problem. I just ran a background check on Rebecca Hart. Her law school records show a different maiden name than what's in her current judicial files. Diana felt like she was falling through empty space. What name? Harold. Rebecca Harold Hart. The phone slipped from Diana's hand and clattered onto the kitchen table. Harold's daughter wasn't Maria. It was Rebecca, her closest friend, her confidant, the person she'd shared every professional triumph and personal struggle with for the past 8 years. Diana, Rebecca's voice came through the phone speaker. Please let me explain. It's not what you think. But Alexandria was moving quickly, closing her laptop and gathering her things. Judge, we need to leave. Now. Wait, Diana said, her voice hollow. I need to understand. Rebecca, how long have you been working with your father? Diana, I haven't been working with him. I've been working against him. The words didn't make sense. Nothing made sense anymore. What? I've been the source Alexandria mentioned. I've been feeding information to the civil rights organizations about my father's conspiracy for 6 months. Diana, I've been trying to protect you. Agent Ressler grabbed the phone. Judge Hart, this is Agent Ressler, FBI. You're saying you're the inside source who's been helping expose this conspiracy. Yes. Alexandria, tell her. Tell Diana that I'm the one who gave you access to my father's emails. Alexandria had stopped gathering her things. She was staring at the phone with an expression Diana couldn't read. Ms. Cross. Agent Ressler prompted. Alexandria hesitated. I need to make a phone call. She stepped outside onto the porch, leaving Diana alone with the FBI agents and the phone. Rebecca, Diana said, if you've been helping, why didn't you tell me? Because I knew how it would look. Diana, my father has been planning this campaign against reform judges for over a year. When I found out you were on his list, I started documenting everything. But I couldn't tell you because he would have known he had a leak. Diana sank into her chair. The betrayal was real, but it was pointing in the opposite direction from what she'd thought. "Judge Hart," Agent Johnson said, "can you prove your claims?" "I have recordings, email screenshots, financial records showing the payments from police unions and conservative legal foundations. I have everything." Through the window, Diana could see Alexandria on her phone, pacing back and forth on the porch. Her conversation looked intense, agitated. "Rebecca, why didn't you come forward sooner?" "Because I needed ironclad proof." "And because?" Rebecca's voice broke. "Because I was hoping I could stop him without destroying our friendship. Diana, I've been living with this secret for months, watching him plan your humiliation, knowing I couldn't warn you without compromising the investigation." Agent Ressler was taking notes rapidly. "Judge Hart, we're going to need you to come in for a full debriefing." "I understand. But first, Diana needs to know about Alexandria Cross." Diana's blood went cold. "What about her?" "Diana, I've been researching everyone who's gotten involved in your case. Alexandria Cross isn't who she says she is." Agent Johnson looked up sharply from his tablet. "What do you mean?" "Her law degree is real. Her cases are real. But her funding? Diana, her civil rights organization is funded by a shell company that traces back to a media conglomerate. So this media company has been systematically documenting police misconduct cases not to fight them, but to compile data for law enforcement training companies. They're selling crisis management services to police departments." Diana felt like she was drowning. "Are you saying Alexandria is working for police departments?" "I'm saying her organization makes money by creating high-profile civil rights cases and then selling consulting services on how to handle the media fallout. Diana, she didn't find your case by accident. She was waiting for it." Through the window, Diana watched Alexandria end her phone call and start walking back toward the house. Her expression was different now, harder, more calculating. "Judge," Agent Ressler said quietly, "we need to consider the possibility that you've been manipulated by multiple parties with different agendas." Diana thought about the past 18 hours. Alexandria's perfectly timed appearance, her immediate willingness to take on a high-profile case, her sophisticated understanding of media strategy, her access to inside information about the courthouse. It had all felt too convenient, too perfect. Alexandria opened the front door and stepped back into the kitchen. Her demeanor had completely changed. "Judge Reeves," she said, her voice now professional and distant, "I've just received some information that changes everything." "What information?" Agent Ressler demanded. "My organization has been in contact with several media outlets. Given the complexity of this case and the federal implications, we've decided that the best course of action is to step back and allow the proper authorities to handle the investigation." Diana stared at her. "You're abandoning the case?" "I'm ensuring that it receives the appropriate level of professional attention." Alexandria's words were carefully chosen, legally precise. "Judge, you'll be in excellent hands with the FBI." She was already moving toward the door. "Wait," Diana said, standing. "What about the press conference? What about going on the offensive?" Alexandria paused at the threshold. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and Diana saw something in her eyes that looked almost like regret. "Judge, sometimes the most important battles are won by knowing when to retreat." And then she was gone. Diana stood in her kitchen, surrounded by FBI agents, connected by phone to a friend who was actually an ally but had been forced to deceive her, abandoned by an attorney who had never been what she seemed. Every relationship she'd trusted had been built on deception. Every alliance had hidden agendas. Every source of support had been compromised. She was more alone than she'd ever been in her life. "Diana," Rebecca's voice came through the phone, small and desperate. "I know you can't trust anyone right now, but I need you to know that I never betrayed you. I've been fighting for you the only way I could." Diana looked at the phone, then at the FBI agents who might or might not be what they claimed, then at the empty doorway where Alexandria had disappeared. "Rebecca," she said quietly, "I need to know something. Are you the only one? Are you the only person in my life who's been lying to me?" The silence on the other end of the call stretched for what felt like an eternity. "Diana," Rebecca finally whispered, "I wish I could say yes. But there's something else you need to know about Maria." Diana felt whatever remained of her world crumbling. "What about Maria?" "She didn't just leave a noose in your office last night." "Diana, she didn't leave anything at all. I found the noose this morning when I went to check on your chambers. Maria never came to the courthouse yesterday after the incident. She disappeared. Agent Ressler stepped forward. Disappeared how? No one has seen her since she left work early yesterday afternoon. Her husband filed a missing persons report this morning. Diana, I think she's been eliminated as a witness. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Diana sank back into her chair, the full scope of her isolation finally becoming clear. Everyone she'd trusted had either betrayed her, deceived her, or vanished. The one person who had truly tried to help her, Rebecca, had been forced to lie to her for months. And somewhere out there, people powerful enough to make witnesses disappear were still planning her destruction. Judge, Agent Ressler said gently, we need to get you to a safe location immediately. Diana looked around her kitchen one last time, at the coffee that had gone cold, at the sunrise that no longer seemed beautiful, at the life she'd built that was now in ruins. Agent Ressler, she said, I don't think there is a safe location anymore. Because she finally understood what she was really fighting. This wasn't just about racism or corruption or judicial independence. This was about power. And the people who held it would do anything to keep it, even if it meant destroying her completely. The FBI safe house was a sterile apartment in a part of the city Diana had never seen before. Agent Ressler had insisted on moving her there after Maria's disappearance became official. But the walls felt more like a prison than protection. For 3 days, Diana had been cut off from everything that defined her identity. Her courtroom, her chambers, her routine, her purpose. The ethics hearing was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Without Maria's testimony, without Alexandria's legal support, without any way to prove the conspiracy beyond Rebecca's word, Diana faced the very real possibility that her judicial career would end in disgrace. She sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the resignation letter she'd started writing for the 3rd time. Your Honor, Agent Johnson said, entering with coffee and a tablet. There's been a development. Diana looked up with hollow eyes. Every development, for the past 3 days, had been another blow. Harold had filed additional complaints. Her sealed divorce records had been leaked to 3 more news outlets. Someone had started a petition calling for her impeachment. What now? Judge Harold has requested a private meeting with you. Diana laughed bitterly. He wants to gloat? Actually, Agent Johnson said, his expression grave. He claims he has information about what happened to Maria. He says he'll only share it with you directly. Absolutely not, Agent Ressler said, entering the room. It's obviously a trap. Diana studied the tablet Agent Johnson had placed in front of her. Harold's message was formal, typed on his official judicial letterhead, but there was something desperate in the wording. Judge Reeves, the letter read, I understand you have no reason to trust me, but I believe Maria Santos is alive. I also believe I know who took her and why. If you meet with me privately, I can provide information that may save her life and expose the true scope of what we're both fighting. I propose we meet at the courthouse, in neutral territory, with appropriate security present. This is insane, Agent Ressler said. Judge, Harold is the one behind this entire conspiracy. But Diana was reading between the lines. Something in the letter's tone reminded her of the closing arguments she'd heard from desperate defense attorneys. The carefully controlled panic of someone who'd lost control of their own case. What if he's not? Diana said quietly. What do you mean? What if Harold isn't the mastermind? What if he's just another pawn? Agent Johnson frowned. Judge, all the evidence points to Harold as the orchestrator. All the evidence Rebecca gave us. But what if Rebecca was wrong? What if she's been manipulated too? Diana stood and began pacing the small living room. For 3 days, she'd been accepting the narrative that Harold was evil, Rebecca was good but misguided, and Alexandria was opportunistic. But none of it had felt complete. Think about it, Diana continued. Harold is 73 years old. He's 2 years from retirement. Why would he risk everything to destroy a handful of reform judges? What would he gain? Agent Ressler shook her head. Power. Control. Ideology. Or, Diana said, someone else is pulling his strings too. Someone with more to lose and more resources to deploy. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Judge, this is Rebecca. I'm using a burner phone. Don't trust the FBI agents with you. Harold is ready to talk, but only if you come alone. Maria is alive, but not for long. Agent Ressler reached for the phone. Judge, don't respond to that. But Diana was staring at the message with growing certainty. Agent Ressler, can I see your credentials again? Judge, we've been through this. I'd like to see them. Now. Agent Ressler hesitated, then handed over her badge and identification. Diana studied them carefully, then looked at Agent Johnson's credentials. Everything looked official, but Diana had spent enough years reviewing fraudulent documents to notice subtle inconsistencies. The badge numbers followed a pattern that didn't match federal standards. The ID photos looked slightly too new. Agent Ressler, Diana said slowly. What office are you based out of? The downtown federal building. Which floor? Another hesitation. 7th floor. Diana had visited the FBI office in the federal building twice for judicial security briefings. It was on the 9th floor. There was no FBI presence on the 7th floor. Agent Johnson, Diana said. I need to use the bathroom. She walked calmly toward the back of the apartment, then locked the bathroom door behind her. Her heart was pounding as she dialed 911 on her phone. 911, what's your emergency? This is Judge Diana Reeves. I'm being held against my will by 2 people claiming to be FBI agents. I need immediate assistance. She gave the address and hung up, then climbed onto the toilet seat and opened the small bathroom window. It led to a fire escape that she'd noticed during her first day in the apartment. Diana had never imagined she'd be climbing out of a bathroom window at 51 years old, but the past week had shattered most of her expectations about life. The fire escape was rusty and loud. By the time she reached the ground level, she could hear shouting from inside the apartment. She ran toward the main street, praying that real police would arrive before the fake FBI agents found her. A black sedan pulled up to the curb just as Diana reached the sidewalk. Her heart stopped until she saw Rebecca in the driver's seat. Diana, get in. Diana hesitated for a split second, then dove into the passenger seat as sirens began wailing in the distance. Rebecca, how did you? I've been watching the safe house. I figured out they weren't real agents yesterday, but I couldn't get word to you safely. Rebecca was driving fast but carefully, checking her mirrors constantly. Diana, this conspiracy is so much bigger than we thought. Where are we going? To meet my father. Because as much as I hate to admit it, he's the only person left who might have answers. Diana stared at her friend, the woman she'd known for 8 years, who'd hidden her parentage but fought to protect her, who was now risking everything to help her escape from fake federal custody. Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Anything. Are you in love with me? Rebecca's hands tightened on the steering wheel. They drove in silence for nearly a minute before she responded. Yes, Rebecca said quietly. I have been for years. But Diana, that's not why I'm doing this. The admission hung between them like a bridge Diana wasn't sure she could cross. Her divorce from Marcus had been final for 3 years, but she'd never considered the possibility that Rebecca's loyalty went beyond friendship. Rebecca, you don't have to say anything. I know you're straight. I know you've never thought of me that way. But I needed you to know the truth because we might not survive what's coming next. Diana reached across the center console and took Rebecca's hand. Rebecca, I don't know what I feel right now, but I know that you've been the most honest person in my life, even when you couldn't tell me everything. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but she kept driving. Diana, there's something else you need to know. About Maria. Is she alive? Yes, but she's being held by the same people who sent those fake FBI agents. And they're using her as bait. Bait for what? For you. Diana, they don't just want to destroy your career. They want you dead. The words hit Diana like ice water. Why? Because you're not just a reform judge anymore. You've become a symbol. And symbols are dangerous to people who profit from the status quo. They pulled into the parking garage beneath the courthouse, the same building where Diana had worked for 15 years, where her chambers had been violated, where her professional life was about to end in disgrace. Rebecca, if we're walking into a trap. We are walking into a trap, Rebecca said. But it's the only way to save Maria and expose the truth. They took the elevator to the judicial floor in silence. Diana's chambers looked exactly as she'd left them, except for the absence of the noose that had been left as a warning. Harold was waiting in her chair, looking older than she'd ever seen him. Diana, he said, standing slowly. Thank you for coming. Judge Harold, Diana replied formally. I'm here for Maria. Where is she? She's safe for now. But we need to talk first. Harold's voice was heavy with something Diana had never heard from him before, fear. Diana, I need to tell you about the phone call I received after your traffic stop. What phone call? From the man who's been funding this entire operation. The man who ordered me to make that anonymous tip. The man who told me that if I didn't help destroy you, my own family would be next. Harold opened his laptop and turned it toward Diana. On the screen was a photograph of a man in an expensive suit standing next to a familiar figure. Chief Williams. Diana, Harold said, his voice breaking. The police chief who came to help you that night? He's been orchestrating this entire conspiracy from the beginning. Diana stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. Williams had seemed so professional, so concerned about justice. He'd been the one to insist on playing the anonymous tip recording. He'd been the one to suggest that Harold was behind everything. But the recording was edited. Diana, Chief Williams made me practice that script until my pronunciation matched what he needed. Then he used voice modulation software to create the anonymous tip. Rebecca was reading over Diana's shoulder. Dad, if Williams is behind this then. The lights in the office went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. They're here, Harold whispered. Through the office windows, Diana could see figures moving through the courthouse corridors. Security guards, but not the ones she recognized. Men in tactical gear, moving with military precision. Diana, Harold said urgently, there's something else. About Alexandria Cross. What about her? She wasn't working for a media company. She was working for Williams. Her job was to get close to you, gain your trust, and then abandon you at the crucial moment to make you feel completely isolated. Diana felt her last hope crumble. Alexandria hadn't been opportunistic or conflicted. She'd been deliberately sabotaging Diana's ability to fight back. Judge Harold, Rebecca said, her voice tight with fear. We need to get out of here. Now. But as they moved toward the door, it opened to reveal Chief Williams himself, flanked by 2 officers in tactical gear. Judge Reeves, Williams said, his voice no longer carrying the respectful tone he'd used during their previous encounter. I'm afraid you're under arrest for interfering with a police. On whose authority? Williams smiled coldly. On the authority of a federal warrant issued by Judge Alexandria Cross. Diana's blood turned to ice. Alexandria is a judge? Federal magistrate. Appointed last month to handle sensitive cases involving judicial misconduct. Judge Reeves, you've been under federal investigation for corruption since the day you took the bench. The trap was complete. Every person Diana had trusted, except Rebecca, had been part of an elaborate scheme to destroy her. Every moment of hope had been calculated manipulation. Where's Maria? Diana demanded. Safe. She'll remain safe as long as you cooperate with the investigation. Diana looked at Harold, who had collapsed into his chair, then at Rebecca, who was standing protectively beside her despite being outnumbered. Chief Williams, Diana said, what do you want? Your resignation. Your silence. Your complete withdrawal from public life. And if I refuse? Williams gestured to one of his officers, who handed him a tablet. On the screen was live video footage of Maria, bound and gagged in what looked like a warehouse. Judge Reeves, your former clerk is being held in a location that's scheduled for demolition tomorrow morning. The demolition will proceed on schedule unless you sign the resignation papers I've prepared. Diana stared at the screen, watching Maria's terrified eyes pleading for help. You'll kill an innocent woman to silence me? I'll do whatever is necessary to protect this community from judicial activism that threatens public safety. Diana realized she was facing the impossible choice that would define the rest of her life, and Maria's. Save Maria by surrendering everything she'd fought for, or fight for justice while an innocent woman died for her principles. As the red emergency lights cast shadows on the walls, Diana understood that she was about to discover exactly what she was made of. Diana stared at the screen showing Maria's terrified face, her mind racing through every legal strategy she'd ever learned. But this wasn't a courtroom where evidence and argument could win the day. This was raw power confronting absolute vulnerability. 30 seconds, Judge Reeves, Williams said, holding out a pen and a resignation letter. Sign and Maria lives. Refuse and she dies for your principles. Harold was slumped in his chair, defeated. The tactical officers flanked the doorway like sentinels. Rebecca stood beside Diana, her presence the only solid thing in a world that had become fluid and dangerous. But as Diana reached for the pen, something in Williams' expression caught her attention. A flicker of uncertainty. A micro-expression that reminded her of nervous witnesses in her courtroom. Williams was sweating. Someone that confident in their control shouldn't be sweating. Someone that powerful shouldn't be checking his phone every 30 seconds. Someone truly in charge wouldn't need tactical officers to intimidate a middle-aged judge. Chief Williams, Diana said, not taking the pen, Who's giving you orders? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. No one gives me orders. Then why do you keep checking your phone? Why do you look like someone who's afraid of failing an assignment? William's hand moved instinctively toward his service weapon, confirming Diana's suspicion. He was scared of someone. Judge Reeves, you have 15 seconds. But Diana was studying the tactical officers now with the same intensity she'd once reserved for analyzing witness testimony. Their gear was expensive, professional grade. Their posture suggested military training. Their faces showed the kind of discipline that came from working for organizations with unlimited budgets. These weren't local police officers. These were private contractors. Rebecca, Diana said quietly, what did your research show about the funding sources behind this conspiracy? Diana, this isn't the time. Answer the question. Rebecca hesitated, then spoke quickly. Shell companies leading back to defense contractors and private security firms. Millions of dollars flowing through organizations that specialize in social stability consulting. Williams was definitely sweating now. Time's up. But Diana ignored him. Chief Williams, how much are they paying you to do this? How much is your integrity worth? You don't understand the forces you're dealing with, Williams snapped, his carefully maintained composure cracking. This goes so far beyond one traffic stop, beyond one judge. You stumbled into something that's been operational for years. What kind of operation? Williams looked at his phone again, then at the tactical officers. Diana could see him calculating something. Judge, there are 17 reform-minded judges, prosecutors, and civil rights attorneys currently under active surveillance across 4 states. You weren't just targeted because of your rulings. You were targeted because you fit a profile. What profile? Educated black women in positions of judicial authority who can't be bought, intimidated, or controlled through traditional means. The words hit Diana like a revelation. This wasn't about her specific cases, or even her activism. This was about systematically removing women like her from positions of power. How many have you eliminated? Diana asked. Williams checked his phone again. Sign the resignation, Judge. Please. You don't understand what happens if I fail to deliver it. For the first time since this encounter began, Diana heard something human in Williams' voice. Not just fear, but desperation. Chief Williams, she said gently. Who's holding your family? His face went white. The tactical officers shifted uncomfortably, and Diana realized they hadn't known about Williams' personal situation. Judge, don't. Someone has your wife and children, don't they? Someone told you to destroy me, or they'd be killed. Williams' hands were shaking now. Judge Reeves, you need to sign that paper. For both our families. Diana felt the final pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Williams wasn't the mastermind. He was another victim. Harold had been coerced through threats to his family. Even Alexandria had probably been forced into her role through leverage Diana couldn't yet see. Chief Williams, Diana said, what if I told you there was a way to save both Maria and your family? That's impossible. Diana looked at Rebecca, who was watching her with a mixture of love and terror. Then she looked at Harold, who had raised his head with the first glimmer of hope she'd seen from him. Rebecca, you said the funding comes from defense contractors and private security firms. Which specific companies? Diana, which companies? Blackstone Security Solutions is the largest. But Diana, what are you thinking? Diana pulled out her phone and dialed a number from memory. Judge, what are you doing? Williams demanded. I'm calling Senator Patricia Hayes, Diana said as the phone rang. Chair of the Senate Subcommittee on Defense Contracting Oversight. Williams lunged forward to grab the phone, but one of the tactical officers surprised everyone by blocking him. Officer, stand down, Williams ordered. Sir, with respect, I don't think our contract covers threatening senators, the officer replied. Diana smiled grimly as the phone connected. Senator Hayes? This is Judge Diana Reeves. I'm calling to inform you that Blackstone Security Solutions is currently conducting illegal domestic operations on American soil. Yes, ma'am, I have evidence. Yes, ma'am, I'm in immediate danger. Ma'am, I'm going to put you on speakerphone so you can hear this directly. Williams was backing toward the door, his phone buzzing frantically. The tactical officers were looking increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Senator, Diana said loudly, I need you to hear this conversation. She turned to Williams. Chief Williams, tell Senator Hayes who's been giving you orders to eliminate reform judges. I can't. Tell her, or explain to your wife and children why you chose to protect war profiteers instead of fighting for them. Williams collapsed into a chair. Senator Hayes, this is Chief Robert Williams, Metro Police. I've been coerced into participating in a domestic intelligence operation run by Blackstone Security Solutions. They've been systematically targeting judges, prosecutors, and attorneys who pose a threat to their law enforcement consulting contracts. Through the phone, Diana could hear keyboard clicking and multiple voices conferring. Chief Williams, Senator Hayes' voice was steel. Are you telling me that a private defense contractor has been conducting domestic surveillance and intimidation operations against federal and state judicial officials? Yes, ma'am. Where are their operational centers? Williams looked at his phone, which was still buzzing with calls. Senator, if I give you that information, they'll kill the hostages. Chief Williams, this is now a matter of national security. I'm authorizing an immediate federal response. Where are they located? Diana watched Williams wrestle with the decision that would define the rest of his life. Save himself and his family by cooperating with criminals, or trust the system he'd sworn to serve. There are 3 locations, Williams said finally. The primary command center is in the Blackstone building downtown. The hostages are being held at a warehouse complex on Industrial Boulevard. The surveillance operation is run out of a fake FBI field office on 7th Street. Rebecca gasped. That's where they had you, Diana. Senator Hayes was talking rapidly to someone off the phone, then returned. Federal agents are en route to all 3 locations. Judge Reeves, are you in immediate physical danger? Diana looked at the tactical officers, who were now removing their helmets and setting down their weapons. Ma'am, one of them said, we were hired for personal protection, not domestic terrorism. Judge, we're withdrawing from this contract. As the officers filed out, Diana felt the balance of power in the room shift completely. But Williams was staring at his phone with growing horror. They know, he whispered. They know I talked. Chief Williams, Diana said. Where exactly are your family members being held? The warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. Same place as your clerk. His voice broke. Judge, I'm sorry. I've been trying to protect them, but I've made everything worse. Diana looked at Rebecca, then at Harold, then at the phone where Senator Hayes was coordinating a federal response. Senator, Diana said, how long until federal agents reach the warehouse? 12 minutes. Williams shook his head. They'll kill the hostages the moment they see federal agents approaching. Diana felt the impossible choice crystallizing into clarity. She could wait for federal agents and hope they arrived before the hostages were executed. Or she could try something that would either save everyone or get them all killed. Rebecca, she said, I need you to call every news station in the city. Tell them Judge Diana Reeves is holding a live press conference in the courthouse lobby in 5 minutes. Diana, what are you planning? Diana was already moving toward the door. I'm going to give them what they want. Me. In exchange for the hostages. Judge, that's suicide, Williams protested. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to save Maria, your family, and expose this conspiracy before they can destroy the evidence. Rebecca grabbed her arm. Diana, I won't let you sacrifice yourself. Diana turned to face her friend, the woman who'd risked everything to protect her, who'd loved her silently for years, who was offering to stand with her against impossible odds. Rebecca, this isn't a sacrifice. This is strategy. But I need you to trust me. How do you know this will work? Diana smiled, the first genuine smile she'd managed in days. Because I spent 15 years learning how to turn legal proceedings into theater. And it's time to put on the performance of my life. She kissed Rebecca gently on the forehead. Not romantic, but intimate in a way that acknowledged everything between them that had never been spoken. If this works, Diana said, we'll have time to figure out what comes next. If it doesn't work, it's going to work, Rebecca said fiercely. Because I'm not losing you now. Diana nodded and headed for the elevator. She had 4 minutes to save 3 lives and expose a conspiracy that threatened the entire judicial system. But for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like she was finally fighting on her own terms. Diana stepped into the courthouse lobby to find it already packed with reporters. Word had spread faster than she'd anticipated. Rebecca's calls to news stations had triggered a feeding frenzy. Camera crews from 6 different networks were setting up equipment, and the live stream audience counter on someone's phone showed 47,000 viewers already watching. Diana had no prepared remarks. No legal team. No safety net except her 15 years of courtroom experience and the absolute conviction that transparency was her only weapon left. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the marble-columned space. "My name is Judge Diana Reeves. 4 days ago, I was the victim of what appeared to be a racially motivated traffic stop. Tonight, I'm here to expose a domestic terrorism operation that threatens the independence of the American judicial system." The lobby fell silent except for the clicking of camera shutters. "I'm going to tell you about a private military contractor called Blackstone Security Solutions that has been systematically targeting judges, prosecutors, and civil rights attorneys across multiple states. I'm going to show you evidence of coercion, kidnapping, and conspiracy at the highest levels of law enforcement." Diana pulled out her phone and held it up so the cameras could see. "Chief Robert Williams of Metro Police is currently in this building. He's been forced to participate in this operation because his wife and children are being held hostage. My former law clerk, Maria Santos, is also being held captive. Both families will be executed unless I resign from the bench and withdraw from public life." The murmur that went through the crowd of reporters was like electricity. "But here's what the people behind this conspiracy didn't anticipate," Diana continued. "They didn't anticipate that terrorizing a judge would turn her into a very angry attorney with nothing left to lose." Behind the crowd, Diana could see federal agents entering the lobby. Senator Hayes had been true to her word. "Rebecca Hart," Diana called out. "Would you please join me?" Rebecca approached, carrying Harold's laptop. Diana could see the fear in her friend's eyes, but also absolute determination. Rebecca is a sitting judge who has spent the past 6 months documenting this conspiracy from the inside. "Rebecca, would you please show the American people what we've discovered?" Rebecca opened the laptop and turned it toward the cameras. On the screen was a network diagram showing connections between Blackstone Security, police departments across 4 states, and a web of shell companies funneling millions in defense contractor profits. "This operation," Rebecca said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was revealing, "has successfully forced 7 reform-minded judges to resign in the past year. It has intimidated dozens of prosecutors into dropping civil rights cases. It has created a climate of fear designed to protect law enforcement agencies from accountability." Diana's phone buzzed with a text from Williams. "Federal agents approaching warehouse. They're going to kill the hostages." Diana held up her phone so the cameras could see the message. "I'm now receiving word that federal agents are approaching the warehouse where the hostages are being held. The terrorists holding Maria Santos and Chief Williams' family have threatened to execute them if law enforcement intervenes." Diana looked directly into the primary news camera. "Blackstone Security Solutions, I know you're watching this broadcast. I know you have the power to execute innocent people. But here's what you need to understand. Killing those hostages won't stop this story. It will only make it the lead story on every network in America." The lobby was completely silent now. Even the reporters had stopped taking notes and were simply watching. "You see, you made one critical miscalculation," Diana continued. "You assumed that threatening me would make me back down. But I'm not backing down. I'm doubling down." She pulled out a thick folder that Rebecca had handed her. "In my hand, I have copies of financial records showing that Blackstone Security Solutions has received over $40 million in government contracts since beginning this domestic operation. I have email communications between Blackstone executives and police chiefs discussing neutralizing activist judges. I have recordings of phone calls coordinating harassment campaigns." Diana's voice rose, carrying the authority she'd wielded in her courtroom for 15 years. "I have evidence of federal crimes. Conspiracy, kidnapping, domestic terrorism, racketeering, and I'm releasing all of it to the media right now, whether the hostages live or die." She handed copies of documents to 3 different reporters simultaneously. "You wanted to silence me to protect your operation," Diana said, looking directly into the cameras. "Instead, you've given me the biggest platform I've ever had. Congratulations. You've turned a local judge into a national symbol of judicial independence." Her phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown, but Diana answered on speaker. "Judge Reeves." The voice was electronically disguised but clearly agitated. "You need to stop this broadcast immediately." "Good evening," Diana said calmly. "Would you mind identifying yourself for the 40,000 people currently watching this live stream?" "Judge, if you don't end this press conference and sign the resignation papers, we will execute the hostages on live video." Diana felt ice in her veins, but her voice remained steady. "And if you do execute them, You'll be committing murder on national television in front of federal agents who are already surrounding your location. How exactly does that help your situation? Rebecca was holding up her phone, showing a live police scanner feed. Diana could hear federal agents coordinating their approach to the warehouse. You have 30 seconds, the voice said. No, Diana replied. You have 30 seconds to release the hostages and surrender to federal authorities. Because in 31 seconds, I'm going to release the financial records showing which specific government officials have been taking payments from your operation. The silence on the phone stretched for several seconds. Judge, Rebecca whispered. Police scanner shows federal agents are in position. Diana looked around the lobby. News cameras broadcasting live to millions of viewers. Federal agents coordinating a rescue operation. Reporters with evidence of a vast conspiracy. Everything was now beyond anyone's ability to control or contain. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, Diana announced, you're about to witness the end of a domestic terrorism operation in real time. Through the courthouse windows, Diana could see emergency vehicles racing toward Industrial Boulevard with lights and sirens. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You win this round. But this is bigger than Blackstone. We'll be back. Diana held up the phone so the cameras could record the message. Let the record show, she said, that domestic terrorists just threatened a sitting federal judge on live television. Rebecca's phone rang. She answered and put it on speaker. This is Agent Torres, FBI. We have successfully secured both hostages. Maria Santos and the Williams family are safe and unharmed. 7 suspects in custody. The cheer that went up in the courthouse lobby was audible for blocks. But Diana wasn't finished. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying over the celebration, we've rescued the immediate victims of this conspiracy. But the larger threat remains. Private military contractors are operating on American soil, targeting American officials, subverting American justice. She looked directly into the primary news camera. This isn't just about me. This isn't just about racial profiling or judicial independence. This is about whether we're going to allow corporate interests to buy and intimidate their way to immunity from the rule of law. Diana paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. Tomorrow morning, I will be in my courtroom, conducting normal business. Because that's what judges do. We show up, we follow the law, and we refuse to be intimidated by anyone who thinks they're above it. The applause that followed wasn't just from the reporters in the lobby. It was from courthouse staff who had been watching from the balcony above. It was from federal agents coordinating the operation. It was from people across the country who had been watching the live stream and finally seeing someone fight back against institutional intimidation. But as the crowd began to disperse, Diana's phone rang one final time. The caller ID showed Senator Hayes. Judge Reeves, the senator's voice was urgent. You need to know something. The Blackstone operation was just the tip of the iceberg. What do you mean? We've been analyzing the financial records you provided. Blackstone was subcontracting for something called Project Stability. Judge, this operation extends to 17 states and has been targeting not just judges, but journalists, civil rights lawyers, and elected officials. Diana felt the magnitude of what they'd uncovered settling over her like a weight. Senator, how many people are we talking about? Over 300 individuals under active surveillance or intimidation. Judge Reeves, you didn't just expose a conspiracy. You exposed an entire shadow system designed to suppress dissent in American democracy. Rebecca took Diana's hand as the implications became clear. Judge, Senator Hayes continued, I need to ask you something. The Senate Judiciary Committee is launching an emergency investigation. We need someone to testify about what you've experienced. Someone credible, fearless, and completely untouchable. Diana looked around the lobby, now buzzing with reporters filing stories that would reshape the national conversation. She looked at Rebecca, who was smiling through tears of relief and pride. She thought about Maria, safe now because Diana had chosen to fight rather than surrender. Senator, Diana said, when do you need me in Washington? Tomorrow afternoon. Judge Reeves, are you prepared to take on the entire military-industrial complex? Diana laughed, the first genuine, unguarded laugh she'd managed in a week. Senator Hayes, for days ago I was just a judge trying to drive home from the park. Now I'm apparently at war with private armies funded by defense contractors. I think my preparation for this fight happened whether I wanted it or not. Judge, one more thing. After your testimony tomorrow, there's going to be intense pressure for you to accept a federal appointment. The Department of Justice is already floating your name for a task force on domestic security oversight. Diana looked at Rebecca, who squeezed her hand encouragingly. Senator, I appreciate the offer. But I think I'll stay right here in my courthouse, doing exactly what I was doing before this all started, holding people accountable for their actions, regardless of how powerful they think they are. As Diana ended the call, Rebecca moved closer to her. Diana, Rebecca said quietly, you know this isn't over, right? You've made yourself a target for every corrupt system in the country. Diana smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. Rebecca, I've spent my entire career fighting corruption from the sidelines. Now I'm fighting it from the center ring. And you know what I've learned? What? I'm not afraid of them anymore. Because I've discovered something they never anticipated. What's that? Diana looked around the courthouse lobby, at the reporters still broadcasting her story, at the federal agents coordinating the ongoing investigation, at the building where she dispensed justice for 15 years and would continue to do so. I've discovered that the truth, properly presented and fearlessly defended, is the most powerful weapon in any legal system. Rebecca leaned over and kissed her, soft, quick, but unmistakably real. Diana, she whispered, I love your version of proper legal procedure. Diana laughed, finally understanding that she hadn't just survived this conspiracy. She'd transformed it into the foundation for a much larger fight. And she was going to win that fight too. 6 months later, Judge Diana Reeves pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Park at 5:47 p.m., exactly as she had every Tuesday for the past 3 years. But as she laced up her running shoes, she couldn't help smiling at how different everything else had become. The car next to hers held 2 discreet security personnel, a precaution that Senator Hayes had insisted upon after Diana's congressional testimony had led to the indictment of 43 individuals across 12 states. The Project Stability investigation had become the largest domestic terrorism prosecution in American history. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Dinner at 7:30? Maria's bringing the lasagna she promised. Diana typed back, perfect. Love you too. The words still felt new, even after 4 months of saying them. She and Rebecca had moved slowly, carefully, building their romantic relationship on the foundation of friendship and shared purpose that had sustained them through the crisis. Diana had discovered that love, like justice, worked best when it was based on truth and mutual respect rather than dramatic gestures. As she began her run along the familiar path, Diana reflected on how much had changed since that evening in December when a routine traffic stop had exploded her life into chaos. Chief Williams had been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, but his cooperation with the investigation had been extensive and valuable. His wife and children were safe, and he'd testified that Diana's decision to expose the conspiracy publicly had saved not just his family, but potentially hundreds of other targets. Diana had written a letter to the court supporting a reduced sentence. Justice, she'd learned, sometimes required mercy alongside accountability. Judge Harold had retired quietly, but not before providing crucial testimony about the financial networks behind the conspiracy. His relationship with Rebecca remained complicated, but they were rebuilding it slowly. Harold had been a victim too, Diana realized, just one who had made worse choices under pressure. His cooperation had helped expose 2 additional private military contractors running similar operations in other regions. Maria Santos had returned to work as Diana's clerk after a month of counseling and recovery. The kidnapping had been traumatic, but Maria had also become one of the most effective witnesses in the federal prosecution. She'd testified with quiet dignity about the systematic intimidation campaign that had targeted her specifically because of her access to Diana's schedule. Her courage on the witness stand had helped secure convictions against the Blackstone operatives who had threatened to kill her. Alexandria Cross had been revealed as a complex figure, neither the ally Diana had hoped for nor the enemy she'd feared. Alexandria had been coerced into her role through threats against her mother, who lived in a nursing home that Blackstone had arranged to fund. When Diana learned this, she'd helped arrange federal protection for Alexandria's mother and worked with prosecutors to secure Alexandria immunity in exchange for her complete cooperation. Alexandria was now working pro bono on civil rights cases, attempting to rebuild the reputation she'd compromised during her months of forced cooperation. The fake FBI agents who had held Diana in the safe house had been revealed as former military contractors with extensive training in psychological manipulation. Their arrest had led to the discovery of 16 other fake federal facilities across the country where various targets had been isolated and controlled. But perhaps the most satisfying resolution had been the systematic dismantling of the private military contractor network that had funded the operation. Congressional investigations had revealed that Project Stability had been a profit-driven enterprise disguised as patriotic security work. The companies involved had been selling civil unrest management services to law enforcement agencies, while simultaneously creating the unrest they claimed to be controlling. Diana's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Senator Hayes. Judge Reeves, the senator said. I have news. Good news, I hope? The Justice Department task force you recommended has been approved. Permanent oversight of private military contractors operating on domestic soil. Full funding, broad investigative authority, and a mandate to prevent exactly what happened to you. Diana smiled as she ran. Senator, that's wonderful. Who's going to head it? Well, that's why I'm calling. The president wants to nominate you. Diana had been expecting this offer for months. The federal task force would be prestigious, powerful, and nationally significant. It would also require her to leave her courthouse, her community, and the work that had defined her adult life. Senator, I'm honored by the consideration. Diana, before you say no, let me tell you what this position would entail. You'd have authority to investigate any private security firm operating on American soil. You'd have a budget larger than most federal agencies. You'd be able to prevent what happened to you from happening to anyone else. Diana paused her run and looked back toward the courthouse, visible in the distance. Her chambers. Her courtroom. The place where she'd learned to wield justice as both sword and shield. Senator, can I? Of course. How many reform-minded judges are currently serving on benches across the country? Approximately 4,000. And how many of them have the experience, resources, and support system to survive the kind of systematic attack I survived? A pause. Probably not many. Senator, the federal task force is crucial. But so is keeping people like me on local benches, showing other judges that it's possible to stand up to intimidation and survive. I think my most important work is still right here. Diana could hear Senator Hayes smiling through the phone. Judge, I had a feeling you'd say that. The president asked me to tell you that the task force position will remain open whenever you change your mind. Thank you, Senator. That means more than you know. As Diana ended the call and resumed her run, she thought about the choice she'd just made. 6 months ago, she would have seen the federal position as the natural culmination of her career. More power, more prestige, more ability to create change on a larger scale. But 6 months ago, she'd been thinking about justice as something that happened in courtrooms and legal briefs. Now she understood that justice was something that happened when individuals chose to stand up for their principles despite the cost. And that kind of justice could happen anywhere, in a courthouse in a mid-sized city just as easily as in a federal building in Washington. Diana's phone buzzed with another text, this one from an unknown number. Judge Reeves, this is Angela Ressler, a public defender in Phoenix. I'm facing intimidation similar to what you went through. Can you help? Diana stopped running and immediately called the number. Angela, this is Judge Diana Reeves. Tell me what's happening. For the next 20 minutes, Diana listened to a story that sounded disturbingly familiar. Anonymous tips, harassment, systematic attempts to undermine a lawyer who'd been too effective at holding law enforcement accountable. Angela, Diana said, you're not alone in this. And you don't have to fight it alone. I'm going to connect you with some people who can help. As she ended the call, Diana realized that this was her answer to Senator Hayes' question. The federal task force would investigate and prosecute these conspiracies after they'd already damaged lives and careers. But Diana could help prevent them by creating a network of support for people under attack. By the time she finished her run, Diana had formulated a plan that felt more important than any federal appointment. She arrived home to find Rebecca in the kitchen, reviewing case files while chopping vegetables for a salad. Maria was setting the table, looking healthier and more confident than she had in months. How was your run? Rebecca asked, kissing Diana softly. Productive. Rebecca, how would you feel about starting a nonprofit organization? Rebecca looked up sharply. What kind of nonprofit? A legal defense fund for judges, prosecutors, and attorneys under systematic attack. Not just legal representation, but security consultation, media strategy, financial support. Everything I needed, but didn't have 6 months ago. Maria paused in her table setting. Your Honor, that's a brilliant idea. How many people do you think need help like that? Based on the calls I've been getting? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Rebecca was grinning now. Diana, that's perfect. You could create the support system that prevents what happened to you from destroying other people's careers. We could create it, Diana corrected. Rebecca, I need someone who understands both the legal side and the personal cost. Someone who's lived through the deception and manipulation. Someone I trust completely. Rebecca set down her knife and moved closer to Diana. Are you asking me to be your partner in this? Professionally and personally. I'm asking you to help me turn the worst experience of my life into something that protects other people from experiencing it. Yes, Rebecca said immediately. Absolutely yes. Maria cleared her throat. Your Honor, if you need a coordinator for victim support and case management, I'd like to volunteer. Diana looked around her kitchen, at the woman she loved, at the colleague who'd survived trauma alongside her, at the dinner table where they'd share a meal and plan their next steps. This felt more like victory than any federal appointment ever could. Ladies, Diana said, I think we're about to change the world. One case at a time. As they sat down to dinner, Diana's phone buzzed with another text from an unknown number. Judge Reeves, this is a prosecutor in Michigan. I think I'm being targeted. Can we talk? Diana showed the message to Rebecca and Maria. Well, Rebecca said, looks like we're already in business. Diana smiled and typed back. Yes, we can talk. And you're not alone. Because that, she'd learned, was what justice really meant. Not the grand gestures or federal appointments or national headlines, though those had their place. Justice meant ensuring that people fighting for what's right never had to fight alone. 3 weeks later, the Diana Reeves Legal Defense Fund received its nonprofit status. Within 6 months, it had prevented the forced resignation of 11 judges and prosecutors across 7 states. The organization's success rate was unprecedented, largely because Diana had learned that the best defense against systematic intimidation was systematic support. But perhaps more importantly, Diana had discovered something about herself that she'd never known. She was happiest not when she was wielding the most power, but when she was using whatever power she had to help other people find their own strength. Every Tuesday evening, she still ran the same route through Riverside Park. But now she carried a phone that connected her to a network of allies across the country, and she returned home to a woman who loved her and a mission that gave her life meaning beyond any single case or ruling. 6 months ago, Diana had been a respected but isolated judge, fighting corruption from the bench. Now she was part of a movement that was rebuilding the very foundations of judicial independence in America. The traffic stop that had nearly destroyed her career had instead become the beginning of her most important work. Justice, Diana had learned, wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing. It was about creating a world where doing the right thing didn't require impossible courage, just ordinary people willing to stand together. As she pulled into her driveway that evening, Diana's phone buzzed with one final message of the day. Judge, this is David Chin in Seattle. I think they're coming for me next. Please help. Diana smiled and typed back immediately. Help is on the way. You're not alone. Because in a world where powerful interests would always try to silence inconvenient voices, the most radical act was simply refusing to let anyone fight alone. And Diana Reeves had spent her entire career learning how to make that refusal into something approaching justice. What did this story teach you about courage under pressure and the power of community in fighting institutional corruption? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.